Each piece, depending on how I feel, it's sort of like a diary entry. Like each stage that I do per day, I always try to work on a painting every single day, just so that there's some release. I have to have some release somewhere. And depending on the piece, there are the times where, let's say on a particular day, I would feel really shit, but the minute I start painting and actually doing something about my emotions, it starts to flip on itself. And you can kind of see that in every stage of a painting, because my paintings have a lot of layers, and I like almost building so much on it. So sometimes there's also that control aspect where I don't want to go overboard to the point the painting doesn't look good. It's also trying to have restrictions but have freedom. So it's always been about balancing everything out. And for me, painting the surface of the painting, whether that being canvas or paper, I consider a lot of it in a feng shui mentality, where I look at the piece and depending on my emotions, my thoughts and everything, I almost compose it so that it flows well, and that there it's not only just thinking about the composition of the piece, but it's also thinking about the color balance, the textures, the different brushes that I'll be using, the different materials that come into play. Because for me, each material, each color, each aspect of my painting, or it exudes a certain emotion to me. Sometimes I see colors in tone, like musical notes or like a musical note that transpires in the emotion that I feel. So I look at that a lot in terms of the way Kandinsky, an artist who I look up to so much, he uses spirituality in his art, and he really considers how music becomes this fuel for him to, it's almost like the middle part of the process where music helps him go through the process of the spirituality of his emotions to then translate it onto paintings. My emotions get very heightened very easily, and there are times where I just don't know how to control it. And for me, painting has always been something that soothes sort of the exaggerated emotions that I often feel, and it helps me just focus and have time to analyze those feelings and analyze these thoughts and emotions that I have. Yeah, painting for me has always been a way to organize them and to analyze where my headspace is at and my mental health, because I feel like I can get very extreme on both ends of the spectrum, where it could be extremely happy one moment and then it could be very sad the next. And of course, when you go to the more negative side of the spectrum, it becomes very debilitating when you don't know how to control it otherwise. So for me, painting has always been a way to escape all of that and to come to terms with who I am and how I could deal with it. Not necessarily sweeping it under the rug and forgetting those emotions, but acknowledging and improving on myself. And the paintings that I create that will be in the show is all a part of that thought process, from how I think about analyzing those emotions to actually translating it onto more physical spaces to see how I feel and to visualize all those emotions. And it's also the process of over analyzing in my head, but through painting and making sure that those negative thoughts and emotions turn into something positive for me instead of seeing it as such a dark thing. I'm trying to embrace who I am, the good and bad side of things, but also to be more in control of myself, because there are times I could lose grips on who I am or lose grips on how I deal with certain situations. So it's just for me to calmly and rationally keep my emotions and thoughts at bay. I started painting since I was 5 years old, and since then I've just been exploring myself through art. And because I was lucky enough to have a father who's an artist as well, and I have a mom who was a flight attendant, I was able to be exposed to all the different cultural uh, arts and the different artists that come from different countries. So I started getting an understanding of tradition and the way people express at their time and place. And since then, because of that exposure, I've been very curious of how to do paintings the way, let's say, Picasso or Frida Kahlo would do it. And I think it started off as a lot of imitation, and then finding my voice within that. And the last 10 years, there was a lot of experimentation that had gone down, where throughout university I was kind of in this very weird limbo space where I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't know how to do it. And being in a college setting allowed me to experiment, and my professors would always force us in a way to come out of our comfort zone. So we really tried everything. I went from sculpture, painting, drawing, illustration, watercolor, wood, printmaking, everything, and just trying to find a way to keep my curiosity going. And therefore I feel like my style will just always change and it'll develop and grow. But I think my work before university was very restricted, because I would do very figurative, almost hyper-realistic, proportionate drawings that I felt lacked my creativity and my creative freedom. I felt very like I had to be set on the rules, and I have a OCD tendency where I just want everything to be perfect. But then as I got out of university and trying to find my own voice within, I mean, like outside of university and outside of sort of the education safety net, if you will, I started just really exploring. And I said to myself, okay, I want to get out of this restricted way of making and kind of start being a little bit more playful and true to myself. So it was really hard. It took me a really long time to go from figurative paintings to abstract, because it seemed art museums, I kept just like playing around and taking the time to really grow with everything. So where I am now, I landed in a way of, I looked at, again, Kandinsky is a big influencer of mine, and Cy Twombly is another person. The freedom, I was very envious of the freedom. At some point, I just said to myself, okay, I'll just get something really big. I'll get a really big piece of paper, a really big canvas, and let me just almost dance with it. Like, allow myself to feel the art through my body. And since then, like, allowing myself to be that free, not even in my mind or my hands, but through my body, allowed me to land where I am now. The body armor series is several pieces that I'm trying to take my work into more three-dimensional interactive spaces, because I feel like my paintings show a lot of me internally, and the process of me going through the process of, you know, understanding my emotions and my feelings, and therefore how and therefore trying to mirror how I feel on the inside and how I feel on the outside, because I feel like there's such a separation with that. So the sculptural pieces that will be coming up in this residency that will be starting in January with Trestle Art Space, I will be taking all the internal emotions that I have in my paintings onto sculptural, interactive, and maybe performative type work. I'm still not quite sure yet, but I definitely want to take it into more physical spaces that people and audience members and myself including can interact with, because I feel like painting could be such a internal and very personalized experience that the viewer, with the digital age, I'm very aware of the fact that people are losing the physical connection and the, you know, interpersonal relationships that they create with people that they meet. And with this work, I hope and I want that my work could create almost like a community of people that are very open and willing to observe, but also take in information, and almost like creating like a bonding experience with the work, because I feel like painting is such a, there's still a bit of a wall with painting, but with something like sculpture, you can walk around it, you could probably touch it, you could probably interact with it and create an experience for an audience to feel and to come to their own conclusions, whatever that might be. So having more of an open ended experience in more of the physical space.